I use a couple of assessments. Well, actually, there's two that I generally use, and then there's a third that occasionally I use. So generally, I use the VIA, the Values in Action, Strengths Assessment.
Yeah.
I use that pretty much with every client.
Right.
Occasionally with an executive, maybe something that I wait longer to use, but I pretty much use that with every client. Yeah. And then I also identified a set of gifts that are in conflict with school. So these are actually things that are good about students, but actually make them look worse in school.
Right.
And so with students, I will generally do that assessment of gifts.
Right.
Or with families, like sometimes it's parents, it's not students.
Yeah.
That one occasionally I will also use with executives. It depends on the person.
Right.
But if I'm sensing that there is something there, and you probably know this, but a lot of adults are carrying scars from their school days, even way into very, very successful careers. Yeah. So sometimes I'll use it in that situation.
So the VIA and the gifts and...
The gifts. So the third one occasionally will be Myers-Briggs.
Yeah.
And usually the way I use that is I check with them to see if they've done a Myers-Briggs. Right. And I don't usually send them off to do it. I mean, if it's something they really want to do, then of course. But sometimes what I'll do is find out, because a lot of people have done it. Yeah. I mean, even students. And if they have, we might bring that into the conversation.
Right. And so how do you bring something like the VIA or the Myers-Briggs into the conversation?
Well, so VIA, what I'll do with them is... Often I'll do it in the session with them, is actually go through the VIA with them. I just find with executives, and by the way, I also use the VIA sometimes when I'm facilitating executive teams. Again, it depends, but I have used that multiple times doing that. And I find time and again that they do not want to go take a survey by themselves. They don't have time, they don't want to be bothered doing it. It's amazing to me. Like, I love taking these surveys, so I can't believe that other people don't, but they don't. So what I'll do is, in the session, we will go through it together, and they will identify some of their strengths. Yeah. And then we'll begin talking about how they use their strengths. One of the things I will do is, once I know their strengths, I'll keep a list of their strengths, so that as I'm in a session with them, I might start to notice, oh, there's your humor again, and so I will sort of talk about, oh, I see that you're using, but a lot of it is asking them, how do they use their strengths, how could they use their strengths.
And you mentioned using VIA in teams?
Yes, so for example, if when I'm doing an offsite, let's say with an executive group, so that's something where they might be running, say, a 3-day meeting. And they've got specific topics that they're trying to cover in that meeting. But I'm helping plan the meeting, and I'm facilitating the meeting, thinking a lot about how do we build positive emotion in this meeting? How do we build trust? How do we build commitment? How do we build engagement? I'm thinking about those kinds of questions. And of course, I'll talk with the person scheduling, that's, the executive whose meeting it is. I don't just go off and do these things on my own. But for example, I might use the VIA as a way of having the team connect with each other in a new way. One way that I've used it, I've used it a lot of different ways, but for example, one way that I've used it is each executive around the room identifies their top 5 strengths. And then I've actually had the strengths up on the board around the room, and they put little Post-its up with their initials. So we now have sort of a map of the organization. Where does the organization have a lot of strengths? Yeah. Where does the organization, maybe curiosity. This organization only has a couple people with curiosity. Yeah. Well, there's a lot of things then to talk about. We can talk about where the organization has a lot of strengths. Let's say they have a lot of creativity. Yeah. Well, we can talk about how that shows up, why that is, different ways people are bringing creativity. Or we can also use it at the individual level. So we can kind of go back and forth from individuals to organization, but we can look at it at the individual level. And so, first of all, when I'm listening to you describe your strengths, that's uplifting for me, right there. Just that in and of itself. Then, as a facilitator, I will say, well, okay, so Ebby says that he has persistence as a strength, diligence as a strength. Do any of you see that in him? Around the room, people will be going, yeah. I say, anybody care to share an example? One of Ebby's colleagues will say, oh, well, I can remember when Ebby did X, Y, Z, and I really just saw you. You were so diligent about that. And so we create this bond and trust. So that's sort of a combination of the individual and the organization. There's a lot of different ways.